I love it. David, it's wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
My pleasure. I'm so glad to be here, Joe.
Me too, man. So before we get into your work, I want to know this. 5 years ago, this pandemic changed everything, hit New York especially hard. How did you make it through that pandemic era of 2020, and how has it changed or influenced the way that you live and work in 2025?
My life both thrived and fell apart in that exact same time period.
Wow.
So, positive part first, right? I had run a New York-based event series, this idea of let me connect connectors to each other. I had just switched jobs from running a global arts charity to working directly with Ray Dalio and his family to incubate and build a film company focused on social impact. So I had an incredible job with an incredible family who were friends of mine, or are friends of mine. And when COVID hit, Hollywood died. It was really hard to work remote, but the network I had built sustained my ability to reach out and talk to people anywhere on this planet because of the trusted relationships I had already built. And in that, because I hate the way most events were run, I figured out the way that a Zoom event would work, where everyone said, your slogan is, David, finally, a Zoom event that doesn't suck. And so I started that, and my network tripled in size.
Wow.
And the people that would join, like, built lead certification, launched Activision Blizzard, the gaming company. They were amazing humans that were looking for a community like this. So while everyone was suffering in many ways, the people I kept meeting were thriving. But at the same time, because there's always a if and or but to that story, um, my marriage was falling apart. It was challenging living outside New York and Long Island with family in such an intimate way. And by the time I got back from COVID, ended up getting divorced, ended up moving out. But my kids are thriving. My work is thriving. So it all came from the grit and resilience by necessity to figure out a way to build community when everyone felt so isolated and alone, including me.
So is the adage sometimes it needs to be broken to get fixed? Is that kind of the silver lining?
I mean, every part of it, it needs to be broken and fixed. Unless you break it or you make the mistake, you don't learn from it.
Yeah.
One of the most important things I learned from working with Ray Dalio was this idea that even if you didn't cause a problem, if it was a problem that you had to solve, you had to take ownership as if you had in order to fully think through the solution. And that flabbergasted me because I was willing to find the solution and take responsibility, but it was a different level. So I took that on for my life, for what my strategic plan needed to be, what my kids needed from me, what my network needed. And that 5-year plan was to launch a book, which I did this past August. It became a USA Today bestseller. To build a startup, which I am now a year and a half into, just about to close for my second round, and to take this network from New York and Zoom. Now it's in London, Toronto, DC, Chicago, Austin, Dallas, Miami, LA, and San Francisco physically, and representing 35 countries and 187 cities. So it all got there. I'm extremely tired doing it, but the goal was to build something that was for the greater good, not just for me. And I'm in the middle of achieving it. The only silver lining is my kids see the job as a connector, as a job they might have one day in this world. And that was my goal, to make the people who were really focused on relationship value finally be valued for their contributions to making everything else work.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a regular basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of kids at a grade school. It's career day. They're 12 and they want to know what you do for a living. How do you answer them?
Well, given that I have an 11-year-old who acts like she's 12, this is a little easier, but thank you for the question.
Yeah.
When you tell kids what you do, you don't need to talk about what you do or how you do it. You have to talk about why you do it. And so the thing I'd say is the friendships around you now may last, some of them for the rest of your life. At some point, there will be things to celebrate in your life, and some point, things will be harder. But the people who always remember you, who follow up, who build relationships, who, when you're out of college, you need a job, call you up and say, hey, Linda, don't you do this? You should meet my friend Joe. And so that world of relationship building is one of the most important things you can do. We all do it. I've built a profession around it to connect and make introductions where everyone trusts me. And then the outcome, what happens from it is the thing you want actually happens because of the power of the intro.
What did you want to be when you were 12 years old? What was your dream gig?
Given I read a lot of political thrillers and sci-fi and fantasy. I wanted to be a spy. I wanted to be a lot of things, but actually the sort of founding story for what made me me is when I was 12, I got incredibly sick. I entered sixth grade with some condition that felt like it was chronic. I actually recovered from it, but I was bedridden for months. I got bronchitis. It was like Lyme's disease meets fibromyalgia. So my sixth grade was a formative year by being absent from the initial formation of that. And ever since then, I've tried to figure out how I fit in, where I belong, because I never felt I did. And I was like an all-star baseball player, you know, very skilled pianist, and everything got derailed until I realized what I do now comes from facing that adversity. That was my first real test in life. COVID was the most recent one,
Yeah.
but that was how I started. So my 12 was a little different than most others.
Absolutely. So when COVID came back around, was there a deja vu to you going through what you went through earlier on in life? Was there any parallelisms?
Not as much for COVID in particular, but I've been living in the shadow of my daughter, Eva, starting middle school, which she just did several weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I just sit there like thinking to myself, like, I was sick. Will she get sick? Will something go wrong? This is what
Yeah.
happened to me. Like I'm living in the fear of that, even though it's not grounded in reality.
Yeah.
So I've had to relive a lot of what that trauma was and process it without also scaring my kids of being open about what I'm going through. So it's been a really interesting balance because at the same time that happened, my book came out, my startup launched, and like got bigger and more purposeful. And I'm still sitting in those shadows that I don't think we escape. I think we just learn how to have a different perspective on them.
One of the most therapeutic things out there for people to get engaged in is music. How much is being in that world of music and playing piano and being immersed in this music world that you're in? How therapeutic, how good was that for you?
It's my salvation.
Yeah.
There's some things that you can criticize people on, you can take away from them. No one can take away the fact that since I was 12, when I started to improvise music, I've now written over 230 works. If you say to Alexa, play the music of David Homan, you can hear seven of my albums. But no one listens to classical music. And two, the way my older sister Beth describes my music is bathroom music, meaning that thing you do in the private moment you don't really share with anyone else. And so I've lived in that world of never being fully celebrated for what I bring in that. But my music, it helps people deal with loss, with anxiety, with insomnia, to find purpose. Like my whole point in life was if I can create those melodies to help people find resonance. Then when I took that into my world of what's called orchestrated connecting and the book Orchestrating Connection, how do you find that resonance amongst people to create that same sense of understanding and purpose? And so it's all become one now, but I'll say, yesterday I needed a nap. So I turned on one of my most well-respected pieces, which is a string quartet called Einstein's Dreams. Within 4 minutes, I was out like a light because my music helps me fall asleep when I need to more than anything else.
Was that a throwback to the Alan Lightman book, Einstein's Dream?
Actually, I love that you know that. So, yes. So, two close friends of mine who are my dad's graduate students down at the University of Florida adapted Alan Lightman's book to become a theatrical show. When they took that to the Fringe Festival in 2001, I scored that work. It won a bunch of awards at the Fringe Festival, everything but Best Show, because at that year, 2001, Debbie Does Dallas, the show won the big accolades. I mean, who doesn't want to see that? I mean, in a tame theatrical form. But I wrote a string quartet that then I derived about 2 hours of music from. And it was all this understanding of the dreamscapes, of the way that time passes, time standing still, time on stilts, time moving forward, what happens when time is paused. And so my intention was, can you create a meditative state where you don't understand how much time passes. And within these four movements of a 25-minute work, you lose track of time, you lose track of your thoughts, and you can really take your heartbeat and bring it down to a much more evocative state. And something in that work achieved that. So every friend who has insomnia, I send it to, and they say, thank you. I don't really know what the third movement is because I'm always asleep by then. But it was really great to hear subconsciously.
I am going to download that immediately. I actually in the mid 90s I went to Seattle to visit family friends and I went to Victoria, British Columbia, and it's beautiful up there. And sometimes I'll interview people from there. And my most distinct memory of being up there is I went to a park bench and I read that book. And I just watched this land in front of me that was so beautiful unfold. And just all of the mechanisms that went into that book was just kind of orchestrated in front of me. And I always remember fondly. I love Alan Lightman. I love that book. But that park bench, I will never forget being there reading that book. So I'm going to definitely, I'm going to dive in. I can't wait.
I love it. Well, so what I will say is I will gladly email that to you and
Okay.
anyone who listens who wants to. I have yet to record this professionally because it's been recorded um, live twice.
Yeah.
And so I haven't released it into the world because of
Okay.
that.
Okay.
It's a game plan. It's like figure out the finances of children and the startup and a book, and I'll
Yeah.
get there. It's my next project
Yeah.
after a film I'm working on. But that work is in an amazing recorded form.
Yeah.
It's just out of respect to the performers. It's a live work that I will gladly send
Oh yeah.
privately so everyone can listen
Yeah.
privately and maybe see the world and differently and find some calm in listening to a work that will give them that same sense you had sitting on that bench, Joe,
For
of
sure.
just looking at the world differently, the pacing of people,
Yeah.
the way the sun moves when you don't pay attention.
Yeah.
So happy to share.
That's awesome. I was listening to a quote from Fred Rogers recently, and he was talking about how much noise there is in the world and how we need to like embrace kind of the calm and the quiet. And there's a classical station here in Kansas City, and I always just love the way the movement of that music goes over the world to just kind of open you up like you're reading poetry, like you're recognizing things that get ignored all the time. And it just creates such a wonderful backdrop.
It's so true. I mean, it's there's a reason why more of an aging population listens to classical music than the younger generation. Yet that's been the cycle for every generation for
Yeah.
centuries.
Yeah.
And I think when you get to the point where your life is not as much noise that you are both listening to and creating, your mind starts to work in a much different way. And it's actually great to have music that can create that synthesis.
Yeah.
I do believe that we can find that in how we live today. And the book I wrote was about having that goal. If you are purposeful, then you are striving towards something greater than yourself and content in your life because you love that journey. And the more we surround ourselves with the right people and then the right purposeful and intentional community, we do get away from all that noise. And it's because when people are singing together, playing together, walking together, we not only feel in sync, we feel heard.
Yeah.
And the more we feel heard, the more we actually stop to listen to others as well.
Take me back to your childhood. You're in New York now, and you talked about kind of, going so many different places on the planet. Take me back to your beginnings and how did these seeds of connectivity and music and writing and the arts and humanity, how did all of these things get woven into who you are and what your purpose is today?
So you cannot escape being in the arts when your father is a Shakespearean scholar, modern dramatist, and theater director.
Yeah.
And you can't escape even more when your mother runs an after-school arts program that you have to both attend and help her run from 8 years old. So my entire life was arts.
Yeah.
Since I was two, I was acting. At four, I started banging on pots and pans, and my mom said, please go to the piano instead. I started with an amazing teacher who taught me until I was 18. And so arts and music, theater, even dance I'd gotten to in college have all been a huge part of my life. And we live in this world where we try to cut arts education out. I don't understand it because my entire skill set for being an executive and a successful person is how I carry myself physically, how I speak, and the way that I see the world really as a system. And all of that, the way that you would say sit on that bench and watch all the people around you and their pacing, music has such an integral role in that, as does theater and dance. It hurts me every time somebody thinks it's not necessary, and then they're lonely, can't hold a conversation, can't sell what they need to sell, can't work with a team. Those are all the skills from it. So I had all that. I grew up in Jock, Florida. I loved sports. I was a great baseball pitcher. I was a above average soccer player for where I grew up. What I've learned growing up in Gator country, Northern Florida, is if you're an average athlete there, you are much better than most other people because it's such a competitive environment. But then I got sick. That part we covered, it still haunted my life. And by the time I got to New York, college an hour and a half upstate above the city, and then to NYU for grad school, I knew I wanted to stay in the arts, to have to be in that world of conversation about it. And I used those skills that I'd developed since I was 8, working with my mother and watching and then actually collaborating with my father to master one of the hardest cities on the planet to thrive in, because New York eats most people alive. I've been fortunate now for a quarter of a century to be able to build here, build bridges, build relationships. But that final part, because I know you asked me several different questions in one, I completely did not understand the value of the introduction or the chain of what happens from it until years after significant introductions were made for me. My mom's best friend, who was basically my adopted grandmother, connected me with her best friend from the 20s. And Abby brought me to her house for dinners. I met a network of mostly retired or widowed women. That was the catalyst to become an executive of a nonprofit in my mid 20s. And my brother's high school friend introduced me to one friend of his, and that led me to become eventually board chair of the Arthur Miller Foundation and work to bring theater education, my mom's roots and my dad's together, back to more New York City public schools. So it all comes full circle, but you can never see the power of the intro until the chain of those introductions have happened. And that's that idea of orchestrating your life, orchestrating your connections. You can't get the full picture, but if you bring enough purpose and intent around it, eventually you go from shy kid who could play piano and didn't know how to talk to girls to successful adult who still doesn't know how to talk to girls, but ends up in a world where everywhere I walk into, every room, somehow somebody knows me and they value me and they trust me. And I instantly am trusted by the rest of the most meaningful people in that room, while still going in feeling like that shy kid at 12, trying to walk into middle school and not knowing where I was supposed to sit.
So, who's been that inspirational force for you in your life to evolve and to go full circle and to find your place on this planet?
There's one guy. His name is Michael Roderick. He is the most valuable thought leader on connection that no one has ever heard of. A lot of people have wrote incredible books around not eating alone, being a go-giver, give or take. But Michael, for me, is the single most provocative thought leader who never takes credit for everything that he does that's brilliant. And he taught me early on in my career that I was a connector. He brought me into his world. And from that, I developed an entire new skill set that was a combination of everything that I had that no one else could synthesize together until he gave me that spark. And we just did a major celebration, about 40 of us, to celebrate him, because the world doesn't celebrate his genius the way it should. And we celebrated a Roderick Adventure Day all together just the other week, because not everyone who's substantial in this life is that Jack Welch or that mentor. In some cases, it's the person who gets you to just reframe your thinking.
Yeah.
And from reframing your thinking, sets you on a path that is much greater, sometimes even than their own. And so I value Michael and his contribution for that to me more than anyone else.
So before we depart this music part, I'm fascinated by it. What was the first live show you saw, classical or otherwise, that blew you away and gave you a little bit more gusto to want to do that one day?
There was a talent show when I was 10, and there was this older pianist there, this girl who just she played without technical proficiency. She played some nocturne that I think Bill Evans had written that I wanted to go and eventually play. And there was just something in the way that she stopped time, going back to our Lightman
Yeah.
parallel together, that was so fascinating to me because I just thought, right, if you could get somebody into a frame of thinking that stops where they are and brings them to the now, and then eventually I would put more eloquent words, then they choose not to interrupt it. They choose to be there. What does that mean for what music can do for people? And eventually that became the way I saw the world. How could you get people to listen to something and to achieve silence with them? So it wasn't some major show. It wasn't when I got to see the Rolling Stones on Voodoo Lounge, which is phenomenal with my mom down in Tampa, Florida. It was this girl whose name I even don't recall today that just changed my understanding of how a performer could literally alter your day in a matter of minutes.
That's amazing. So let's get into that Lightman world again with time. Let's say you walk up to the bed that you're in at 12, trying to heal from this kind of malady you're going through. And you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've gained, this accumulation of your place in the world today. What advice, what would you say to that young version of you?
I picked up Kurt Vonnegut when I was 12 and I read a bunch of stuff maybe I was old enough for.
Yeah.
And if I ever, what I've told friends is if I do eventually sell my startup for any substantial amount of money, I will get this tattooed on my left arm. And it is simply the phrase, so it goes.
Uh-huh.
You can put meaning into life. You can be eloquent and talk about everything you'd say to your 12-year-old self, but nothing really matters. It's just the layers we put into it. And the strife I felt from mental health challenges to divorce and COVID and the sickness, if I took those as an affront to me, in the end, it wasn't. It just happened.
Yep.
So it goes. So it went. I would try to give that kid a sense that however you approach life is what your life is. There's not an end result. And unless you love whatever process you are in of it, you will never see how you've grown and how you've evolved from it because it's a slow evolution that suddenly seems incredibly quick.
I love that answer. So, of everything that you've done and accomplished in your life at this point, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
I'm proud that I'm the dad who shows up for his kids to drop them off, to pick them up, to go to games. I'm often the only one. I do a lot in this world now between my travel and the businesses and everything. But my dad was the type who showed up. I mean, my mom was always there, an incredible, nurturing force. But I didn't realize how rare it was that other dads didn't. And I understand why in our society, but I've unapologetically told everyone I work with it's not a choice.
Yep.
And I'm going to be most proud of that. If my book's successful and changes the way we view community, great. I'm going to be at my kids' volleyball game.
Yeah.
If people listen to my music, eventually gets picked up for a Hollywood film and I win an award, great. But what matters the most is my 11-year-old's trying to play violin with me. She only knows a few notes and they're all off key, but she wants to play with me because I'm present with her.
Yeah.
That's what matters more than anything. We can say we want more in this life and that wealth and fame and respect are going to be there, but I don't think there's anything greater than for those that have children taking a charge under you and giving them the freedom to be themselves, but the availability to learn from you, not from afar. And for everyone I know who doesn't have kids, you can still have such an incredible role, even in your friends' kids' lives, if not you're being an aunt or uncle. I don't think there's anything better than that.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need. All of our problems come from, in our world, my world, somebody having bad parenting or a bad childhood.
Yeah.
If we stop that, maybe we wouldn't have world wars.
Yeah.
Maybe we wouldn't have these problems if we just had a better sense of the village of that community, however we give to it.
So true. So, David, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, colleagues, everyone that gets your book, everyone that listens to your music, but you run the show. What is your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I do this exercise a lot with other people, so
Yeah.
I'm both prepared and never prepared because life is changing. I am that shy, at that time, overweight kid who walked into a room and teared up, not knowing where I fit in every single day.
Yeah.
And then I walk into a podcast, I walk into a stage, I have success in life, and I never overcome the feeling that was put into my world by people who instantly judged me, weren't curious or vulnerable, and put me in situations, even if they weren't knowledgeable of what they were doing it, or how they were doing it, simply because they chose not to be curious and vulnerable to learn about me and to give me a chance to share and learn about them. And the person that I am at the core, somebody who will help everyone that I can, will set clear boundaries, and will spend more time than is healthy working to do things that are going to help the people that can't ask for themselves because no one asked for me. And they still don't. I get accolades all the time. The number of people who say, "What do you really need?" then do it, I can count on my fingertips, even with the global network. And so the way I see myself, Joe, is that person who will never put somebody else in that situation and will give them the benefit of the doubt and then take action to help them. That's the example that I like to live by because my dad showed up. My dad wowed the audiences. My dad brought everyone to tears. And then my mom whispered a few things to them and helped them solve their problem. And my incredible parents that friends will come down and visit when I am not there on their way through town. I had this example of what really leading with generosity and kindness is. And that's the person I still see myself as while questioning my own validity in anything that I'm doing.
That's so cool. So, Orchestrating Connection is the book, it's the network, it's your life. If anybody wants to get involved with any of it, the myriad of it, how do they do that?
I've made myself very searchable, but the question is, will you be intentional in contacting me? If somebody knows somebody within my vast network and you wanted a warm intro, tell them why, convince them why. I will always take the time. Everything that I do can be found from the book, videos, a lot of my music on my website, homanmusic.com. I've tried to put all this out there in a way that there's no questions about what I'm after. There's not a secret that then you have to, buy to disclose the final version of. I'm searchable, I'm findable, but I'm very intentional that I want to be with people who are doing something more than their own selfish wants or desires. So convince me of that need, and I'm never the right person. Somebody else I know will be. It's what I've built my network strength on, is building relationships at the speed of trust. So when you approach me, approach it towards building trust. That's what I look for. It's what makes me jump in and help incredible people all over this planet.
Wonderful. David, what a great story. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking time out. Have a wonderful day and best of luck with all this. I look forward to hearing the music. I can't wait.
Same. I will send you that shortly. And I thank you for this incredible podcast and for everyone for listening.
Thank you. I appreciate it.